Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me okay. Welcome to the webinar this morning. I'm Hannah Wheater. I'm the Social Media and Digital Marketing Executive from My HR Toolkit, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. So for all of you that are new to us, My HR Toolkit provides HR software for SMEs, and we run an ongoing programme of webinars covering a variety of HR and business related topics. Today, we are looking at absence management in the new normal with our guest speaker, Kate Marchant. This webinar will discuss how to manage absences post-COVID, given our changing attitudes towards health and hygiene and the rise of remote working and hybrid working. Kate will also be sharing her top tips on how to manage absence in the new normal. Following the presentation today, which will last around 30 minutes, we'll have time to answer some of your questions around absence post-COVID, and you will be able to answer these questions and ask them in the Q&A box on your screen. So if you're not aware of that feature, just give your mouse a little wiggle and you'll see at the bottom of your screen the Q&A box for you there. We also have the Zoom chat as well, so please do get involved in the chat, but if you do have any questions, please make sure to ask them in the Q&A feature there. And just a note of today, today's session is just offering general advice, not legal advice. And also our next webinar will be coming in 2 weeks' time, and that's going to be discussing the mental health, and it's going to be a Q&A session talking about achieving resilience in the return to work. This webinar is going to be really exciting. Actually, we've got 3 panel speakers joining us on this webinar, and we're going to discuss a range of topics that might be coming to light in the return to working with people's mental health. So I will be adding a link to that registration page in the chat feature. So please do click on that feature there to sign up for our next webinar. So an introduction to Kate. So we've got Kate Marchant from Running HR Ltd this morning. So good morning, Kate. Kate has over 18 years of experience in HR, and she's been working in a variety of industries, mainly including the engineering industry. Kate now is currently a HR consultant working with small to medium-sized companies. So without further ado, good morning, Kate. I'll hand over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen now so you'll be able to share your screen.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, and morning, everybody. And first of all, I'd just like to thank my HR Toolkit for inviting me to speak today. And as mentioned, I'm going to cover how to manage absence in the new normal. I'm going to split the session probably just into kind of 2 halves. The first half just giving a bit of a backdrop in terms of what's happened over the last 18 months. I mean, I'm sure we all know, but it's always just worthwhile recapping and just having a look at how it's affected different people, different industries, and where we are now. The second half will look at actually managing absence, you know, and just my tips, which are just my views. Obviously, it's not legal advice, as Hannah said, and just to kind of cover what I think are the best tips. I haven't got a magic wand or a magic formula, but obviously things have changed. Things are different now in terms of the workplace and kind of and potentially the future of the workplace. So before I get into my presentation, I'm going to start in kind of like true style. I've got a poll and we've got 2 questions, so hopefully Hannah will bring the poll up. And if you could just be interested to see kind of what your results are. So we've got 2 questions. Is staff absence an issue in your organisation? Yes, no, or not sure. And have you noticed an increase in mental health related absence in the last year? So that's a yes, no, not sure. So I'll just give you a bit of time to complete. Thank you. Okay, so results are in. So, okay. So is staff absence an issue in your organisation? 49, almost half of you said yes, it is. 41 saying no, with 11% not sure. Have you noticed an increase in mental health related absence in the last year? So yes, just over 50%, no 27%, and not sure 22%. Okay, so that's perhaps as I might have imagined. I think the mental health, we'll talk about it later, and obviously there is going to be another webinar on this as well. So without further ado, let me just get into my presentation. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully everyone can see it. Sorry, just bear with me. I'm a bit slow and I'm a little bit nervous. Right, so here we go. How to manage absence in the new normal. So, well, what is the new normal? Well, it's kind of it's quite a lot different to kind of the old normal. We're in a situation where, you know, our lives, a lot of our lives have changed quite drastically. You know, we're in a world where a lot of people are working from home. There's a lot of increased flexible working. There's just, you know, people have not been able to have as much social contact with each other. There's the whole self-isolation thing. We've all got to wear face masks in and out of public places. We've probably all been using copious amounts of hand sanitizer. We've got the whole testing. We've got the whole kind of like PPE scenario. And I think it's probably fair to say that everybody has had a different experience of the last, say, 18 months. It's not the same for everybody, and people are in quite different situations. And I think that's one of the key things we have to remember, kind of when we're moving forward and when we're managing absence in the workplace. I don't walk in anyone else's shoes. No one walks in my shoes. So it is different for everybody. It's brought a lot of problems. I suppose I should have named it challenges, because that's probably a better word to use. But anyway, I called it problems because there have been some problems. You know, and there have been a lot of different problems, but a lot of them are around what's listed on the slide. So, you know, health concerns, people on furlough. A lot of people have been placed on furlough. I think as of today, there's still 1.5 million on furlough. So more people have come off furlough, and now moving forward, obviously the furlough, the employers are required to contribute more to the furlough scheme. You know, but being on furlough brings a whole new different ball game, and kind of can increase anxiety around kind of like, you know, uncertainty about particular jobs and the future of people's jobs. You know, there's been school closures, so we've had the whole parent working juggling thing. I think lots of kids have appeared on Zoom meetings and kind of like wanted to input in their own way in these various meetings that their parents have been on. And I think also, obviously, parents have had a real struggle of kind of having to manage their children's learning, or help manage their learning, and it goes on. It's still going on. You know, I don't have kids myself, but I do know that obviously lots of children are kind of like going in and out of school, so that's a whole difficult thing to manage. And there have been certain industries that have closed, you know, the obvious ones like the hospitality, aviation, etc. So it's all of these things together have kind of brought, you know, probably brought a lot of mental health issues very much into the spotlight, and we will touch on this as we go on. And I think it's also fair to say that whilst I can say that each individual person has had a different experience of lockdown, the pandemic, it's probably fair to say that employers have had very different experiences. You know, just think, perhaps compare, say, I don't know, maybe a digital marketing media kind of organisation. Most employees are able to work at home, can probably adapt quite quickly, can carry on as normal. Whereas you know, if you think about the retail and the hospitality industry, they've had a whole different experience, and it's been very, very difficult for them. So it's been difficult for the employers, it's been different for the employers, and the same thing with employees. You know, and there's also been the whole kind of like associated risks with everything that's been going on. You know, people have been at risk of infection of an illness, you know, whether that's COVID, obviously that's been the main thing that we've been talking about, but you know, there's also another whole host of people possibly who have had other illnesses that are bubbling under but have been unable to get in to see a doctor, and being unable to actually have treatment, and you know, that could have potentially resulted in a deterioration of physical health. And again, all of this increases anxiety, and the potential for depression, you know, and again, focusing on the people having different experiences. You know, it's been in the news a lot. You can see people, you know, who are working at home, you know, in their nice big houses with their nice big gardens. They can get out, they can get some fresh air, they can kind of have a little bit more control over their lives. Whereas people who are living in, you know, maybe they might be sharing accommodation, they may just be living in a flat, they might not have access to their own outdoor space. So all of these things, this kind of feeling of constraint, can have a big impact on someone's mental health, but also their physical health as well. You know, people are perhaps not getting out enough, or weren't, and maybe it's different now, but perhaps people haven't been able to get out as much, especially in the long winter months of January 2021 to kind of March 21. So that might have had an impact on their physical health. And then there's also, on the other side of things, there's the increased risk of burnout. You know, there's a lot of people who've got a lot to say about, oh, people working at home, they're not as productive, they're not doing the same amount of work, blah blah blah. But actually there are quite a lot of people who are suffering from burnout, who are working at home, because they're perhaps just working longer hours, and there's no kind of distinction between the office and the home, because home is almost becoming the place where you work, and that, you know, the whole boundary is blurred. And then you've got, of course, you've got burnout for people who are present at their workplace, you know, and whether that's key workers in the NHS and care industry, you know, or other kind of like retail workers and keeping the supermarkets going. People, you know, there's been an awful lot of pressure on people, and quite often this can result in increased substance abuse, you know, and whether that's drugs or, you know, perhaps more commonly it's been sort of manifests itself in people drinking more, you know, working parents are potentially hitting the wine at, you know, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon as opposed to 5 or 6 o'clock. I don't know, but again, it's had an impact. And I'm going to come back to this, but just thinking about illness when working from home, and I know I'm probably focusing on remote working or working from home a little bit, but this is perhaps probably where managing absence, where things have probably changed more so in this kind of arena. So you've got, you know, we've had more people working at home and working remotely, you know, and how do you deal with illness when you're at home? Because I think it's probably more tempting for people to actually work through an illness, and employees may find it almost difficult to kind of justify that they need to take time off because, well, I'm at home, you know, my office is just next door. Seems a bit, you know, it seems a bit daft that I can't actually go next door and just carry on working. But people, you know, when you're ill, you do need a break, you know, and you need to treat it in the same way as if you were traveling into the office in a certain way, to a certain extent, you know, and ultimately not taking the time off that you need could actually make for something more serious down the line, and you know, and may actually require more time off you know, and whether that's just due to whether it's mental health issues or any other, you know, any other ill health reasons. And I think it's also down to employers to not encourage presenteeism. You know, people, and again, I'll perhaps touch on this towards the end of the presentation, but it isn't just about being there and being present. It is also about what you do. And I think employers need to take some responsibility for not encouraging this kind of culture of, you know, long working hours, you know, contacting people out of hours when they're already at home, you know, when they're at home. This kind of feeling that, well, actually you're at home, you're working at home, you are at my beck and call. It's not kind of it's not a good culture to work within, and all these sorts of things can often lead to burnout. So just going to run through some stats. I won't go into these in too much detail, but suffice to say, you know, that during the pandemic we've got about 4 in 10 adults reporting symptoms of anxiety or depressive disorder. And then we've got a poll from July 2020 that a lot of adults have kind of had negative impacts on their mental health, and it's kind of like manifested itself in having difficulty sleeping. I mean, I know from personal experience it's affected me in that way, and I know a lot of my friends and colleagues have had trouble sleeping, kind of like during the last 15 to 18 months, you know, and affecting kind of like appetite, and as I said earlier, things like alcohol consumption, and just a lot of worry and stress over what's going on, and you know, and kind of when it will all end. And I think that this is also interesting in that, you know, it's showing that during the second lockdown, 21% of adults experienced some form of depression. That's more than double the figure observed before the pandemic, which again is kind of, you know, is interesting, and perhaps to be expected. And it's kind of it's not ending almost. It's almost predicting that, you know, we're looking at predictions up to 10 million people, that's 20% of the population, will need either new or additional mental health support as a direct consequence of the crisis. You know, we've got 200,000 NHS workers who may need treatment for post-traumatic stress. So it's kind of it's almost like bringing around a whole mental health crisis. And not only that, we've also got the whole issue relating to long COVID. You know, and as we speak at the moment, we've got about 1 in 4 COVID-19 patients will suffer from long-term symptoms. And it's looking very likely, given that if you look at some of the symptoms of long COVID, extreme tiredness, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dizziness, depression and anxiety. Only this morning on the radio I heard that on a phone in, a lady was saying that she's actually got, she's been diagnosed with COVID related diabetes, which is a new one to me. So I think the thing is that the long-term effects of COVID or long COVID are still, we still don't know the kind of like full effect and how long they will go on for. But it's quite clear that some people can experience quite, you know, there's been some, I guess, some quite key cases in the news. I think, gosh, she called Kate Garraway, her husband, forgotten the name. You know, he's been well publicised as kind of really suffering from very, very severe issues due to long COVID. And so they can manifest themselves in some quite debilitating kind of symptoms. And then there are other symptoms which are still classed as long COVID, but it might, when I say just, it might be a case of losing your sense of taste or your sense of smell. But again, I don't know how that affects someone. I mean, imagine not being able to taste anything. You know, that could in itself just bring on depression and anxiety, because you're not back to your normal life, you're not back to what you're used to. And I don't know about anybody else, but not being able to taste food is, well, yeah, I can't really imagine it. And again, sense of smell, you know, it's just how you live. So there's questions really that are left unanswered. And I think most of you guys may know already that the TUC are calling for long COVID to be urgently recognised as a disability, and that COVID to be recognised as an occupational disease. I think, you know, really when we're looking at long COVID, that it's the same, you know, you have to ask the same questions as you do when you kind of like consider any long-term ill health problem. You know, what effect and what impact does it have on someone's day-to-day life and their ability to go about their day-to-day life? And you know, if it's long-term and if it has a major impact, then really you're looking at a disability under the Equality Act, you know, and obviously have to consider making adjustments as you would with any other disability. So kind of getting on, just checking the time here, I think we're doing okay. So just getting on to how to, I call this how to manage remote absences. The name of the webinar is how to manage absence in the new normal. I'm going to focus on remote absence, but obviously in general, we still have absence to manage as we would in the past. I think it's just things are just a little bit different now. So kind of, you know, what do you do? How do you manage absence in the new normal? Well, I think my first, it's not on the slide, but my first port of call would be just to make sure that you've reviewed your absence management processes and procedures. So, you know, have you reviewed your rules around sickness notification? So it's clear that where people are remote, working remotely, that if they do need to be off sick, that they know how to report it. And making sure, and what are you asking for, you know, in terms of certification? You know, the requirements haven't changed, but as I think you all probably know or maybe have experience of, it's quite difficult to get a doctor's appointment. So, you know, you just have to bear all of that in mind, but you need to make sure that your rules around your absence management policies and procedures are clear about what to do. And I think just thinking about self-isolation, I mean, there is still to this day, there's still a requirement to isolate for 10 days if you test positive for COVID, or if you've potentially been exposed to the disease. And this is the case, you know, regardless of vaccination, you know, whether you've been vaccinated once or twice, it's still a requirement. Now, hopefully that is going to change, but today it is still a requirement. And I think, again, it's probably useful to incorporate self-isolation into the absence management policy, insofar as, you know, if you want to ask for proof of self-isolation, then, you know, that people have been pinged or, you know, whatever notification they've received, where you can, then as long as you apply that consistently, then I think it's worth making it clear that is something that you'd expect when people are advising you that they need to self-isolate. So you just need to review your absence management processes to make sure that kind of it has incorporated some of the kind of like newer issues that have come about as a result of the COVID-19 situation, you know, and just be clear. Be clear about when you expect your employees, when they're expected to be at work. You know, you may have a mix, you know, a lot of places will have a mix of people working at home on a hybrid arrangement or actually in the workplace. So, you know, it's just giving some consideration around what rules you're applying, if you like, to those different sets of employees, and making it clear. Is make sure it's communicated and make sure that everybody knows what's expected of them. I put on there encourage vaccination. I'm not really going to go into the whole vaccination situation, but I think it's right for employers to encourage it. We know in the press that it's been reported that there are, I think Pimlico Plumbers is a very good example where, you know, some companies are taking a no jab, no job approach. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just leave that one there. But anyway, I've just covered it by saying encourage vaccination where possible. Moving on, I think employees you need to be sensitive to people's different home conditions. You know, some people can work at home, they've got a separate room they can go to, it's almost like sitting in their own little office, they can look out into the garden, where, you know, we've heard of people working kind of like working on the ironing board in the kitchen. So you just have to be cognizant of the fact that people are in different conditions when they're working remotely, and it's not all one size fits all. And hopefully employers have remembered and are carrying out regular risk assessments for people working at home, and just making sure that everything is set up as far as it can be, and they're not actually working on the ironing board. And if they are, that they can, you know, come up with some alternative arrangements for them. I think the other key piece of advice is about having regular contact. So this isn't just about keeping contact in terms of managing performance, that's my last slide, but this is have regular catch up with your employees on a one-to-one basis. So although they're remote, you can still schedule in regular kind of almost coffee catch-ups, and it's not necessarily just to talk about, you know, where they are in their work regime and what they've achieved this week. It's actually just how are you kind of conversation, and try and understand what they are facing in their lives. You know, if their children are at home because they've been sent home from school, so they have that going on, whether it's cramped conditions, just understand what they're going through. And I think that regular contact, just bearing in mind what we said earlier on about the whole mental health issue, having that regular contact will make you as an employer or as a manager, you know, whoever's carrying out these regular catch-ups, you'll be able to better recognise perhaps when people are not themselves. So just in the way, you know, their body language, the way they're talking. You can also see it in their work, you know, perhaps if someone's suddenly making a lot of errors or they don't seem to be concentrating, they can be warning signs that there's a bit of an issue brewing. You know, and the more you talk to people, the more likely, you know, you have the respect and trust of your employee, the more likely they will bring something to your attention at an early stage. And really that's the key here. You need to be, you know, understanding issues as soon as you can, so that whatever support mechanism you need to put in place can be put in place, and hopefully that might reduce the need for time off. Who knows, it may not, you know, some people may just need to have some time out. I think my other tip would be around the use of, sorry, I'm just going to take a drink here. It'll be around the excuse me, would be choking, would be around the use of return to work meetings. These need to be applied consistently, and this isn't new information. They've always needed to be applied consistently. I think they're a great tool to help manage absence, but they do need to be applied consistently. And if your rules are saying, and I would very much recommend they do say, that you use your return to works for every absence, and these are even if it's just a one-day absence, because who hasn't had that manager saying, oh, do I have to really do a return to work interview because they've only been off for a day, they've just had a cold in the old world, or they've just had a day off in the new world because they were feeling a bit tired and they needed a bit of time out. But you know, that'll be the same manager in 6 months' time coming to perhaps the HR person, or just having a general issue with someone because they've had 6 one-day absences. But if they've applied the return to work meetings consistently, so carrying these out when the person comes back into the workplace, you know, they can actually really help. So, you know, it's an opportunity to update people if they've been out for a while, or even on one day, just to update them what's been going on. Try and understand the reasons for the absence, try and understand if there's any support you can give as the employer, you know, whether it is actually an underlying health issue and there needs to be an occupational health referral. You know, whatever, there's a lot that can be gained for these return to work meetings. It's not an interrogation necessarily, but it is, you know, it's holding the employee to account, if you like, to just discuss their absence, and you as the employer to understand if there are any issues and then what you can do to kind of help and support moving forward. I mentioned self-isolation earlier. You know, you do really need to understand the rules. Personally, one of my tips would be that, you know, if you've got people who need to self-isolate, and that might be fine if they're working remotely, because they can probably just carry on doing their job as normal. But if they're actually required to be in the workplace, that they can't be because they're self-isolating, then I really wouldn't use that as a, if you're using, say, something like the Bradford score indicator to kind of like measure and manage absence, then really I would leave that out. And, you know, in a similar way as perhaps you might leave out absence related to a disability. It's useful really to recognise the signs of burnout, and again these will vary depending on the individual. There's not one sign for everybody, but what I would say is probably, you know, a red flag when people start acting differently in terms of what your normal experience of them is, you know, and just look out for kind of like their work performance and whether that has deteriorated as well. Again, they could be red flags. Occupational health, again, it's not on the slide, but absolutely engage with occupational health. This is an absolute must. And I think the sooner you can engage with occupational health when someone is off sick, then the better. Early intervention with occupational health can often facilitate a quicker return to work, and or it can just it gives you as the employer knowledge. It gives you knowledge about what the employee is facing, and you can start to understand what adjustments might need to be put in place to facilitate a return to work, you know, whether that's back into the workplace or actually back to their remote working. You know, and the other thing that is really key, and especially in mental health issues, is don't make judgments and don't make assumptions. You know, you do need to talk to the employee. You do need to understand what they're going through. You do need to get some occupational health advice, and make decisions based on facts, not based on assumptions, because that will get you into all sorts of trouble. You know, that there have been some cases recently, you know, headline grabbing cases. I've forgotten the name of it, but there's been a recent high profile case where a chap was dismissed because he was seen in the pub, and he won the case, and of course that causes outrage. But when you dig into it, often it's because the employer hasn't followed their own absence processes. It's made judgments that aren't based on facts. It's made judgments on kind of like assumptions. You know, they haven't involved occupational health. They haven't got all the facts, and they've just fallen foul of their own procedures. So, you know, and also, you know, if going to the pub and or socialising is recommended as part of someone's recovery, you know, an occupational health referral might tell you that, you know, and you have to consider that. It just needs to be taken into consideration. So you need to get as much factual advice as possible. And this isn't new really. This isn't new because of COVID. It's always been the requirement. It's just perhaps been a bit more difficult because of perhaps the remote situation, and also because a lot of absence maybe in more recent months are potentially related to mental health issues. I think just kind of the last few points around this is just kind of also encourage your employees to plan for time off. You know, they'll all have an annual leave entitlement, so just make sure that You know, if people are, you're seeing signs of burnout, just gentle encouragement, or perhaps you need to just have some time out, you know, take some leave, you know, have a long weekend, whatever. I think prevention is better than cure, and I think that's what we need to work towards really at the moment. And it's just really not making judgments and just recognizing everyone is in a different situation, and you don't walk in people's shoes, so you need to have these open and honest conversations. Finally, in case I'm just checking I haven't missed anything out, I think you also need to just make sure that you can check, collect and analyse absence management data. You know, what is it telling you? Because this is also a very important part of the process, and again, isn't anything new, but it will be telling you, you know, if you've got a high level of absence due to mental health, then you may need to look at that, or you do need to look at it, and you need to understand, well, what do we need to do differently as an employer? You know, and also ask your employees. Again, it's just, you know, why are they suffering from mental health issues? Is it the workload? Is it the pressure? Is it the hours? What is it? And once you know, then you can start to kind of pull plans together to try and change things and make things, you know, make things better, and take on board some of the employee feedback. Right, finally, sorry, I'm going on a bit. Remote performance management. I think this is another key part of absence management also as well. I think, you know, you need to be able to manage performance in a good way. That sounds naff and vague, but you need to have robust performance management frameworks in place, and really that these performance management frameworks enable performance to be measured by output, you know, achieving goals and targets. You know, what are they doing? What is their output? What are they meeting their objectives? You know, so you need a framework that kind of like that is clear and transparent, and will help and have a framework that allows for measuring by output, that allows for regular feedback sessions. You know, it gives recognition where it's due, goals and targets are set, and there's regular catch-ups to kind of keep track on, well, where's my employee in terms of the objectives I've set, the targets are set, you know, and having continual feedback and taking on board from the employee perspective what's working well and what isn't working well. And again, it's just about output, it's not presenteeism. You know, you don't need to spy on your employees through some kind of fantastic webcam camera. Just measure on their output and make the output, you know, achievable and realistic. It's the same as performance management before COVID. It isn't much different, but it probably needs to be managed a lot more effectively, you know, and this comes around by obviously communicating expectations to the managers that are responsible for managing performance, making sure they're clear on what they need to do and how they need to do it, and really the need to have regular, it's all about communication, clear communication channels, how you communicate, being clear on what your expectations are. I could go on, but I think we're running out of time. So thank you for listening. I hope it's been helpful for you, and hopefully I didn't come across as being too nervous. So thank you very much. I'm just going to hand back to Hannah.
Amazing, thanks for that, Kate. That was great. I think I took a second there after you said my name to sort of wake up a bit, to be honest, because there are so many questions and topics that you don't necessarily think about, and then when they are in front of you, there is so many changes that are ahead of a lot of businesses when returning to the workforce. So that's great. So just a reminder for everyone watching today's webinar, if you have got any questions on what Kate's just mentioned, please do just put them in the Q&A box, and we'll run through them now. So without further ado, there is one question that James put actually. He just asked in the quotation you put in the 2020 study, you said that 68% of remote workers had lost interest in working hard. He was just wondering where that data has come from. We can get the source to you, James, if you pass it on, Kate, because
yeah, I'll
it's
get
really
the source.
interesting.
There is a source. I've forgotten what slide it's on now. Yeah, sorry, my brain's gone too much after
You're
all
all
of that.
right.
There is a source, and I will. I can certainly pass it on to you, James. And I think it was round. It was, if I remember correctly, it was actually round about the fact that people have been feeling underappreciated. So I think this is where perhaps where sometimes the remote working has fallen down, because where employees have had that regular one-to-one catch up with their managers, and they've got the feedback. There are some companies, I've heard of just through speaking to my friends, that have very, very little feedback, and I think people aren't getting the recognition. They feel underappreciated. They're working at home. It just kind of, I think, a loss of motivation has come about.
No, definitely. A question really I had, and I think there's really important, and we'll be touching on as well in our next webinar, is around mental health, because that's as present as ever, and I think there'll be a lot of changes to the way that we work and the way we recognise mental health in a post-COVID workplace. And you touched on it a little bit, Kate, too. So if anything, how would you advise companies to potentially offer mental health days or discuss mental health with employees?
Well, I mean, I think there's lots that employers can do, and it doesn't have to be something that's all singing and dancing and therefore expensive. I mean, I think training up mental health first aiders within the organisation, so there's people that you can signpost your employees to. That's one thing. And I think another thing is just engendering kind of like a culture and environment where people feel safe, if you like, in raising their mental health issues, or just being able to discuss kind of like what they're going through without fear, so that they can, if they are struggling, that they can just talk to someone. And great if that's the line manager, but also mental health first aiders. I think it's also worthwhile just making sure that the employer and the line manager knows that they can signpost to perhaps external organisations. There's also employee assistance programs, which are great. And I think, they vary in price, but there are some very good value ones. And I think, that just enables an employee, they can pick up a phone, they can get advice on their mental health or financial advice if they need it. It's not just related to mental health, but obviously financial worries can have a massive impact on mental health. And I think just consider things like team building events, well, not team building events, but just fun stuff that just to encourage that team spirit, really. So there's lots of things, and I think companies also need to think about the future. It's not just what they do now, because as one of my slides said, I think there's going to be a lot of impact coming, in the future in terms of mental health issues as we come out of the pandemic, and people are almost like released. We get our freedom back and we're released into society again, having been, almost in hibernation for 18 months.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's really great advice as well. I'm sure a lot of businesses will have to come to recommend it. We've also had a question from Helen. These questions are great. We've got a lot of feedback in the chat as well, Kate, so it's a really great webinar. So if you do have any questions, please do make sure you put them in the Q&A section. But Helen's just put, are there any resources that could be recommended in regard to mental health awareness and support at work?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of, ACAS is probably a good place to go. CIPD, sorry, I'm not sure of Helen, I think it was her background, but the CIPD has got an awful lot of resources on there that can, that give advice and guidance and support. I think that I was trying to think of any other key areas. I get a lot of my advice from the CIPD as an HR professional, but there's equally, even perhaps just going to the NHS website, some charities, mental health charities will be able to help. Citizens Advice, ACAS, they would be my main ones. Sorry, my mind has gone a bit blank. I can't, but start with those. There's quite a lot of information and support out there, even just Googling it, and also looking on places like LinkedIn as well. There's lots of webinars, and yourselves are having a webinar as well. So there's a lot of resource available to kind of, if nothing else, to help you plan what your mental health strategy might be.
No, definitely, it is really great. Thank you for that. And a few people have put Mind is a great support for SMEs. There's lots of wellness action plan templates too. So just adding to the work there. But no, definitely. And we do have our webinar coming up as well that is just focusing on mental health within the return to work. And we've got some mental health advocates and experts joining on that panel webinar. So if you do have any more in-depth conversation about mental health or questions, please do make sure to register that. Camille's just popped that in the chat as if we're in sync.
I register myself.
That's great. I think just one final question really is, you mentioned about long COVID and the effects that may have. So is there anything that you'd recommend for employers to put into place that will help introduce or help employees with long COVID?
It's a difficult question to answer because it affects so many different people in so many different ways. I think my advice really would be to manage it as if it is a disability, because I think it has a long-term effect on potentially on employees, and I think you really need to make sure you're getting your occupational health referrals done. So whatever it is that they're suffering from in terms of long COVID, if it's shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dizziness, then they can have a major impact on their ability to do the job. So you need to get the right factual medical information to start off with, and then you need to have consultation with your employee or employees who are suffering, look at their job role and really understand, in open discussion with the employee, what adjustments can be made to their role to help them and for them to be able to kind of like work as normal in the future. And it will depend on the role that they're doing. If they're doing a very manual role, then that's going to be different to if it's office based, depending on the symptoms. So it is a bit of a difficult one to answer, but my advice really is you just do not make assumptions and get professional advice and talk to your employees and make sure you ask the right questions of occupational health. You do need to kind of drill into a little bit of detail, especially if it's for example, physical symptoms around heart issues, diabetes or whatever. You need to ask quite specific questions to get a good referral and good information back that you can act on.
No, that's great. That's a really great answer as well. I guess no size really fits all of that. Just have any burning questions, please make sure to put them into the just a quick. Oh, am I back?
You're back, yeah.
And there we go. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And just a quick reminder as well.
Frozen again.
It appears we might have lost Hannah.
Yes.
So I've just popped on. Sorry, I was going to be in the background because I'm in my noisy co-working space in Guernsey. But I think what Hannah was going to know perhaps was that we do have the next webinar coming up, which is our mental health Q&A panel webinar, which I'll be hosting actually. I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to have 3 fantastic guests on talking all around psychological safety, having difficult conversations around mental health in the workplace. Particularly, we do have the suicide advocate. Oh gosh, I've forgotten his name, but it'll come back to me. We have like an amazing suicide advocate coming in who'll be able to talk about that. And I know that's a really sensitive topic, and I think something that's really good to delve into. And we also have a hypnotherapist, a professional psychologist and hypnotherapist coming on. Asha Burr's on. Steve Phillip is the advocate for suicide, and he does fantastic work. And we also have another psychology consultant for the workplace on as well, Zoe Henderson. So do sign up for that. And I mean, we do have a couple more minutes if anyone has another question, but it seems like everyone's nice and happy, which is good.
I think the thing is that it's quite a big topic to cover.
Yeah.
And I think having these, like you having your break-off sessions with, you know, looking at, you know, mental health specifically, you know, and all the other subjects kind of helps people to focus on, you know, some of the areas that actually you probably can't do justice in a kind of in a broader environment. But thanks everybody for listening to me anyway. Hopefully I didn't come across as too nervous and didn't send everyone to sleep.
No, not at all. It was a really great webinar. I enjoyed it. And everyone, if you'd like to sort of give your feedback in the chat, we always love to hear a bit of feedback on what you thought about it and what you enjoyed. But I thought it was really informative, really great overview of the topic. And thanks so much for coming on, Kate.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Really good.
Thank you for inviting me.
No worries. And yeah, I think, oh yeah, Jane's just said, great webinar. Thank you. It's very kind, Jane. Yeah, and yeah, got a few comments coming in from, yeah, James, Ruth, a few people coming in from Tracy as well. Really informative and very enjoyable. Brilliant. So there you go. Don't think the nerves showed through at all. I don't think so. Yeah, thank you so much. And
Okay.
yeah, I guess we'll wrap up then because we've not had any other questions in.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll leave the webinar open for a couple of minutes just in case anyone wants to use that link to sign up for the next one that's in the chat. But apart from that, we'll power down, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you guys on the next webinar.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Bye.